Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're cracking open a true classic of political strategy. This is essentially a pragmatic survival guide originally written for a Renaissance ruler. Published way back in 1515, Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince gets misunderstood a lot. We aren't going to look at it today through some rigid lens of good and evil. Instead, we're looking at it as a pure, unfiltered manual on the mechanics of power. How do you get it? And honestly, more importantly, how do you keep it? Okay, let's dive into this. We're breaking Machiavelli's treatise down into 6 parts: the landscape of power, the hectic fever, unsinkable states, the danger of mercenaries, mastering the art of war, and finally, feared or loved. Starting with Section 1, the landscape of power, specifically hereditary versus new states. Machiavelli makes it clear right away that not all states are created equal. Your entire strategy depends on the ground you're standing on. You've basically got 2 domains, hereditary and new. Hereditary states, they're like a well-oiled machine. They run incredibly smoothly on tradition and family ties. Because the people are already used to the ruling family, maintaining power here offers amazing stability. Honestly, your main job is just to not break with ancestral customs. New principalities, on the other hand, are inherently volatile. They're dangerous. The second you conquer a new territory, you instantly create enemies out of the people you defeated. And you're absolutely going to disappoint the friends who helped you get there. If you look at this through the eyes of a modern venture capital investor, a hereditary state is basically a mature blue-chip company paying steady dividends, while a new state is a chaotic, high-risk startup where the failure rate is just astronomical. Moving to Section 2, the hectic fever, diagnosing rebellion. Because holding on to those newly acquired, volatile territories is such a precarious game, you have to know how to actually manage unrest before it completely destroys you. And Machiavelli doesn't just give us vague theory here. He gives us a highly actionable checklist. If you're a prince trying to hold on to newly annexed lands with totally different customs and languages, you've got 3 steps. First, go and live there. If you're actually residing in the territory, you're going to spot trouble instantly. Second, send in colonies. It is so much cheaper and way less offensive than sending in a massive occupying army that will just end up angering everyone. And third, strategically weaken any powerful neighbors so they can't be used as a rallying point for local rebels. To really grasp why you have to act so fast, check out this brilliant medical metaphor of statecraft. Machiavelli explains that political unrest is exactly like a hectic fever. In the early stages, it's pretty easy to cure, but incredibly hard to spot. But if you wait until it's obvious to everyone, it's totally incurable. He actually points out how early Roman intervention in Greece prevented later, incurable political maladies. They didn't just sit around and wait for worse to come to their doorstep. They anticipated the fever and treated it immediately. Foresight is literally everything here. Which brings us to Section 3, the unsinkable states, or ecclesiastical principalities. What if you didn't have to worry about unrest at all? In Chapter 11, Machiavelli explores a fascinating historical anomaly that completely defies all the normal rules of conquest. He calls these ecclesiastical or religious principalities. These states operate on an entirely different plane of power. They are sustained by ancient religious ordinances. This means their foundations are so culturally and spiritually deep that the normal, everyday rules of statecraft simply don't apply to them. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer irony of it all. These leaders don't actively defend their states, they don't even really rule their subjects in the traditional sense, yet they remain totally secure and happy. The closest corporate application we have today is what you might call the legacy monopoly. Think of a too-big-to-fail utility, or maybe a nonprofit with a massive endowment, or even those modern tech giants with seemingly divine market share. The foundations are so strong that even a mediocre leader can't easily sink the ship. To maintain this, leaders just need to protect their core IP, embed the brand into daily habits, and keep a fortress balance sheet. But you still have to watch out for signs of aging, like bureaucratic bloat. The playful Machiavellian pro-tip here: if you're running a company that literally has divine market share, your only job is not to mess up the tradition. Enjoy the tenure. All right, Section 4, the danger of mercenaries, arms, and foundations. For the other 99% of rulers out there, relying on divine authority just isn't an option. We have to contrast those stable religious states with the practical, arms-based power discussed in Chapter 12. And that means shifting our focus to the absolute most critical tool for keeping a volatile state, your military. Relying on hired guns, mercenaries, or foreign auxiliaries is exactly what caused the historical ruin of Italy. If you rely on auxiliaries, you become a captive to whoever lent them to you. Mixed armies? They're just inferior. Machiavelli is crystal clear. The only truly secure foundation for a prince is an army made up of his own citizens or subjects. Drilling down into his specific critiques of mercenaries, it's pretty obvious why they fail. They're disunited, excessively ambitious, unfaithful, and incredibly cowardly when the fighting actually starts. And why wouldn't they be? A trifling stipend, a basic paycheck, simply is not enough motivation to make a man die for you. When the battle gets hot, the hired help is going to run away. Every single time. Next up, Section 5, Mastering the Art of War, the Prince's Soul Study. Let's move to and see how this builds into a leader's actual routine. Because you can only rely on your own troops, a ruler has to personally command his forces and constantly, obsessively study warfare. Machiavelli breaks this down into physical action and mental study during peacetime. Physically, a prince shouldn't just be lounging around. He needs to be hunting, drilling his men, and learning every single hill and valley of his terrain so he knows exactly how to defend it. Mentally, he has to read history. He needs to examine the victories and defeats of great leaders from the past. The whole point is that you put in the grueling preparation during the quiet times so you can actually survive the storms when they hit. And finally, Section 6, Feared or Loved, the Psychology of Leadership. This is where Machiavelli's reputation for utter ruthlessness really takes center stage. It basically all boils down to this classic question. It's the ultimate dilemma of a new prince trying to maintain order in a totally chaotic world. Is it better to be loved or feared? Now, in a perfect world, you'd absolutely want both, but human nature rarely allows for that perfect balance. So Machiavelli delivers a definitive, completely unflinching answer. It is much safer to be feared. Why? Well, it comes down to his profoundly pragmatic, if somewhat cynical view of human nature. He argues that men are generally ungrateful, fickle, cowardly, and greedy. Love is just a bond of obligation, and people will break that bond the very second it benefits them. But fear is maintained by a dread of punishment that absolutely never fails. But, and this is a massive but that people always get wrong, being feared does not mean being a tyrant. Machiavelli outlines very strict boundaries a prince has to maintain to avoid the fatal trap of hatred. You can be feared, yes, but you must avoid being hated at all costs. So how do you walk that line? Simple. Do not touch your citizens' property, do not touch their women, and if you absolutely must execute someone, do it with a clear, manifest cause and public justification. And this brilliantly illustrates Machiavelli's darkest, most brutally practical observation in the entire book. He says, men more quickly forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. I mean, wow. It's a dark, incredibly blunt take on human greed. Basically, people will eventually forgive bloodshed, but if you take away their wealth, their land, their livelihood, they will hate you forever. And a hated prince will eventually fall. So, as we wrap up this explainer, which is really a survival guide for princes, or hey, maybe a modern survival guide for CEOs managing established corporate monopolies, we have to step back and ask the big question. Does Machiavelli's ruthless pragmatism still secretly govern our world today? Are the dynamics of power, fear, and strategic foresight truly a thing of the distant past, or are they just wearing modern suits? Think about the power structures in your own life and your own industry and ask yourself, who is really playing the prince? Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. See you next time.